Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Wallop Records. It's Rylan Turner here, joined as always by Kyle Joseph. Kyle, how are you?
Doing all right. We're doing a weird one today.
Yeah, we are. We are talking about the 2025 class in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Before we get into this class, Kyle, you said something to me through text earlier today that I kind of wanted to pick your brain about. You said that you have, I don't know, issues with the Rock. What are your gripes with it?
This is going to be an odd one. And it's going to permeate throughout this. And I think it's going to end our discussion too. Is what is the Rock Hall in 2025? And moreover, what is rock and roll in 2025? Because as far as popular music goes, and by that I mean properly pop music, rock and roll is passe. There aren't any rock songs in the Billboard Hot 100. There are very few rap songs in the Billboard Hot 100 right now. It's very interesting to see how popular music has moved from rock music and rock instrumentation and hasn't pivoted back in a way that it has in the past. Because, with the disco era, dance music had its big craze. And then it ebbs and flows. It comes back to a more rocky thing, and then we go away to more dance thing and back and forth. But we don't go back anymore.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Like, I'd say the last time we kind of went back like that was like a Black Keys type situation. I think they got pretty popular for some of the music they did. And yes, this is over a decade ago, and I'm aware that this is, and it's almost at this point 20 years ago that they put out their first stuff. But like, I do think that like maybe we're just waiting for that next big band to come out and kind of like bring rock and roll to the forefront again, because like it has been a minute. It has been a minute. And I will say, in regards to your question about what is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I think the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is a better name than the Music Hall of Fame. And I think that's what it's become. I don't think that's originally what it was intended to be, but I feel like it's just kind of over time, like we've kind of come to realize that like things like hip hop, that has become with the rock and roll of, you know, the 2000s. That's what it was. Like rock and roll was something that people were concerned about, and we were trying to censor it and whatever, and that's what hip hop became. Rock got soft, and hip hop took over that sort of like rebellious feeling, right?
I get that, and I see that. Where I'm confused is what is the rock and roll of today?
That's a good question, because it sounds like it's 21 Pilots, and I don't know how I feel about that.
So let me be clear about the Black Keys, who I think are obviously an incredible band. They're one of my favorite bands of all time. As far as the pop charts go, the highest that they got on the Hot 100 was Lonely Boy in 2011, hit 64.
Okay,
We're talking about a band that doesn't have any top 40 hits,
that's fair. Okay, sure.
which is kind of an unthinkable thing for any of the acts that we're talking about here.
That's fair. That is also fair. Yeah. Well, I guess it'll be a minute before we see them get inducted then.
But I don't know. That's the thing. That's sort of my question.
Okay, so
Is
do
rock
we
and
know?
roll
Sorry, go ahead.
is rock and roll today the Black Keys, or is rock and roll today, I don't know, Beyonce or Taylor Swift? Is that rock and roll?
I
don't
think
know.
that's a good question. No, I would still say to a certain degree hip hop is still rock and roll now, but like it's being, I think we're in our disco era.
Right. But when was the last time rock was popular? Because to my knowledge, the last big rock acts on the Hot 100, like the pop charts making hit singles, were Nickelback, Maroon 5,
Green Day.
and Imagine Dragons.
Okay. I would say Green Day's in there too.
No, but Green Day wasn't that time.
That's fair.
Like
Okay,
Nickelback was making music into the 2010s. That was pretty popular. Top 10.
I'm definitely not disagreeing with you that there's a bit of a lapse in time where we've seen the actual form of rock and roll be prevalent in what we listen to today and what we hear that's popular today. I'm certainly not arguing that. We live in a very strange time. Are you familiar with how the selections are made?
I have some familiarity with it from the past, but why don't you go over if you want to?
Okay, well, I'll just quickly make sure I have all the guys on it. But the Rock Hall of Fame, essentially, it's a group of musicians, and let me just see if I can Rock Hall of Fame panel. What would they be? What the this is where I need Kyle's vocabulary. They get together in a group and they basically pitch bands every year that go in. I know that Dave Grohl is a part of it. I know that Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine and Audioslave is a part of it.
So the voting process? Yeah, induction process. There's a nomination committee.
Yeah, nomination committee. And like I said, I'm not sure who's all on it, but let's see if I can find out.
I think there's a point that they don't share that per se, because I don't want those people influenced.
Well, I mean, like I'll say, I do know that Dave Grohl and Tom Morello are a part of it because I've heard them talk about it. Regardless, and the Foo Fighters and Rage Against the Machine are both in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which is fine. I enjoy both those bands, but that's neither here nor there. So Kyle, let's get into the 2025 class, which I feel like is a pretty strong class for big time musicians, both rock acts, pop acts, rap acts, and one of them too. Like I guess I'll start with like Joe Cocker. Yeah, very strange. I didn't know a lot about Joe Cocker. I knew that there was some sort of like thing where he had this timeless rendition of with a little help from my friends by the Beatles. I did not realize it happened at Woodstock. And he just kind of just blew people away. And he basically made his career on he would do covers and he would make them a very Joe Cocker style. And as opposed to like just having hits of his own, he would do renditions and they would get popular. Were you familiar with Joe Cocker before today?
Some familiarity, not a lot.
Well, I highly recommend watching the performance of with a little help from my friends or from Woodstock, because like it is very like phenomenal. Like I will say, like it was pretty fantastic to see it. I had seen it as a teenager, but I had long forgotten it. The only one of the group here that I wasn't able to find any videos on or like an induction was Chubby Checker. Do you have any information that I don't?
Not a ton. Like I know a little bit about him. He was a rock singer from the 60s. Did a cover of The Twist that was very famous. He's Let's Twist Again. Like you would probably recognize his singing if you heard it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, not like a huge name in the modern landscape.
Fair enough.
He apparently was doing a concert when he was getting inducted. So props to him. He's 84.
That's fantastic. I love that. Um, Bad Company.
Again, it's not an act I know a lot about. Is this one that you know a lot about?
Not a ton. I did not know they were an English group. I
Mm.
found that out later. But the one thing I will say about Bad Company, and to this day, it kind of makes me laugh. I've never seen a band name a song after their own band name and make it a banger before. Like it's something that you recognize when you hear it. Like for that alone, I don't know. I think that's kind of funny. I don't know in the grand scheme of things, like knowing who's not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I don't know if Bad Company was one where I'm like clamoring to see them get in, whereas like with some of these other acts, like I could see it. This one was just kind of like it was interesting to kind of hear about them, and the induction speech was perfectly fine. But again, it wasn't one of those bands where I was like moved by what I was watching.
That's fair.
The White Stripes.
I mean, it's cool to see them get inducted. Jack White's speech was great. They certainly deserve. They're one of the bigger alternative rock acts. They're kind of the godfathers of industrial rock. At least they got the torch passed to them and ran with it.
I would not call what they do industrial in any way, shape, or form.
It
It is like garage rock, certainly, maybe blues,
Sure.
but I industrial, I would say, is more like we got to make you listen to more Nine Inch Nails. I think. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Nine Inch Nails. No, this one was a big one. Like I saw the White Stripes on their final tour through Canada. They're one of my favorite bands. I like Jack White about medium. I've heard terrible things about the guy, but also just seen him be not a nice person. Rock and roll, like I get it. His speech for me was fine. It would have really been nice to see Meg there, but like I can understand after years away from all that like spotlight and whatever, not really wanting to go back to that in any way, shape, or form. So I appreciate that. Like during his speech, he mentioned that they kind of like they wrote a lot of the speech together. I think that was cool, regardless as to whether she was there or not. I thought Iggy Pop, his little stories about them were quite funny. The performance by Olivia Rodrigo, unfortunately, the sound went out during. I'm assuming they sang "We're Gonna Be Friends," or "You and I are gonna be friends."
Yeah, it was her and Feist.
Right. And then, of course, we had 21 Pilots do Seven Nation Army, which was fine, I guess. Like, I don't know what 21 Pilots is. They both scare me, and like I'm into it a little bit, but like not enough to like listen to a whole album. So I guess it was okay. But like I don't know, like I would have liked to have seen them do a little bit more of their like repertoire. They had some really great songs, especially ones that I feel like are kind of prevalent in today's political climate. All right, let's talk about the top three here. Cyndi Lauper, I thought long overdue.
Cyndi Lauper's an interesting one because she's not someone who I would have necessarily expected to get to the Rock Hall, but I'm happy for it. She was a very great, prevalent musician who was extremely popular in her day. It's surprising to me that she got in this Hall of Fame before the wrestling one.
That's fair.
But like, a lot of her big songs remain extremely popular. She was kind of a huge hit in the 80s, had a massive album in 83. Like, Girls Just Want to Have Fun, Time After Time, all of that stuff still gets played today.
She can still fucking belt too. Like I watched a little bit of the performance. Like her vocals are still well intact. And a really
Yeah.
great speech, a really good induction by Chapel Roan. Like I thought everything kind of like it all came together really nice. I saw Avril Lavigne was a part of the performance, so like, we had
Yeah.
a whole round thing. We even got some Canada in there.
I did appreciate the end of her speech. She sort of talked about how she stood on people's shoulders and that her shoulders were broad enough to carry the next generation, which is a really cool thing. It's cool to have a person be like, you know what? I got you. We're going to keep going through this and we're going to keep getting through this.
It's fair. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, let's talk about Outkast. Uh, Firstly, I was so happy to see them both there. I wasn't sure how that whole situation was going to play out. I didn't know what their relationship was like at this point. So, like, to see them both there was like awesome. I thought Donald Glover did a really, really great job inducting them. It's funny with Outkast, I always find songs that I did not know were Outkast. Just songs that I've heard through my life where I'm just like, oh, I came across it, and then years later I'm like, oh, that's Outkast. I did not know that at all. But like knowing now that, or like they're all the way back to like '94.
Mhm.
Like it makes a lot of sense. Like they've been in and out of pop culture for their entire run. And they have been a part of pop culture basically since their, demise. Like they've stayed. If there's one rap group out there that like has the ultimate staying power, I honestly think like people love Wu-Tang Clan, people love, like NWA. Outkast has a staying power that like those other groups didn't. I don't know. Like, give me some thoughts, Kyle.
I'm obviously a huge Outkast fan. I think that Big Boy is one of the all-time underrated MCs of all time. Like, deserves praise in a way that I think Andre got a lot more. But it was true what Donald Glover was saying during his speech. What Atlanta is in terms of music, where Atlanta has become the epicenter of hip hop. An unthinkable thought when Outkast was starting out.
Mhm.
Like he referenced the 95 Source Awards, which is a huge event in hip hop history. 1995, in the height of the East West feud. Like people died after this. And amidst Biggie and Wu Tang and Snoop Dogg and Dre and Mary J. Blige and Ice Cube getting all these awards, that year, the best new artist of the year as a group, beating out Bone Thugs and Harmony, which is a pretty big deal,
Yeah, I would
was
say so.
Outkast. And in his speech, Andre 3000 said, South got something to say, which was basically to say that your New York, Los Angeles thing, it's not a duality. Hip hop is everywhere, and the South has just as much representation as either of those giant epicenters do. And now, in hindsight, those words feel prophetic because Atlanta is now kind of seen as the hip hop mecca in a way that even New York and Los Angeles don't get that same level, which is crazy to think about, considering that Atlanta was not that even remotely as of 1990.
I
It's really
love this.
cool.
I loved the acceptance speech. Um, Big Boy got every family member in. Every single family member. He whether he got them on the stage or in the speech, he got every single one of them in, which I thought was great. What I like appreciate about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is it seems to be no limit on how long of a speech you have. They're not
Mm.
rushing through it. They feel like they're able to just get up there and say what they need to say. And in a world of award shows that basically give you 90 seconds to thank everybody you need to thank for this huge achievement in your career, it's nice to see it kind of breathe a little. I don't know if you would agree.
I think that's fair. I think the big thing for seeing Outkast there is they absolutely belong.
Mm-hmm.
They deserve to be there. I'm very happy to see them there. Obviously, there are some people who are still a bit jittery about the whole hip hop in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But Outkast is probably one of the most influential acts on music that followed for the last 30 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What did you think of the performance?
I thought some of it was good. I like Tyler the Creator. Him singing Bob's Over Baghdad was great.
That was, I was gonna say, that was the highlight for me. Like, who did Hey Ya?
Hey Ya was, God, now I can't remember. I knew it, but I could not remember it.
Okay, well, either way, I thought that one was okay. But like, and it was funny to see Big Boy on stage. Like, he's definitely a guy who isn't as sharp as he once was. He just looked like he was there to have a good time. And Killer Mike also was phenomenal. But Killer Mike is always great. So big props to that. And he's another guy who just came out of Atlanta and it just has become a monster in hip hop. But yeah, the performance was good. So the only other group we have to talk about, Kyle, I feel like you're probably not super familiar with. You might be super. They might be super unknown to you. Haha, see what I did there?
We've talked about Soundgarden before. I feel like you ought to talk more about Soundgarden because I don't have a ton to say about them. I don't dislike them.
It's fair. Look, Chris Cornell is my favorite singer. He always has been. I love the voice. I love the lyrics. I love the mood of, like, even to the point where, like, he did a James Bond theme song for the first Daniel Craig James Bond song. And it's a really great fucking song. Chris Cornell covered Billie Jean in an acoustic, like, haunting rendition of it. And if you haven't heard that, Kyle, I highly recommend. You'll be blown away. But Soundgarden, that's kind of where it all started for him. And like, throughout my teens, grunge music was huge for me. Soundgarden was always near the top of my list of favorite bands, but he always stood out as, like, in an era of guys who were Eddie Vedder, tried to sound like Eddie Vedder, or were Kurt Cobain. He was different. And he evolved really, really well too. Like, a lot of those bands obviously died out early in the 90s because grunge was such a, a snap of the fingers type situation. From 1990 to, 94, 95, it was the biggest thing in America of music wise. And by the end of 95, it was Britney Spears and boy bands.
And no, Girls. That's not fair. Rock and roll persisted. It was just the alternative scene, the jam band scene.
That's fair.
It's
Counting Crows,
Hootie and the Blowfish.
Yeah, and I will say that, like, there's absolutely like room for that. Like, absolutely, like Matchbox 20s. Those bands all got super, super big after that. I feel like, though, that was kind of like a response to how dark grunge was, and they were like, we need to lighten rock up a little bit because a lot of people just died or are addicted to drugs, and we need to kind of, like, the scene, it was no longer like in vogue, right? So a lot of these bands, like you said, Counting Crows, the Hootie and the Blowfish, like jam bands like that, like they had a really good opportunity to kind of be the forefront of rock. And I do love that era as well. I'm as much as I love grunge, like, I just love 90s rock, really. Like, it doesn't really matter what, the last number is behind 9, I'm into it. Soundgarden again, though, like they were different. They weren't, Nirvana. They weren't Pearl Jam. They were their own thing. Like Kim Thayil as a guitarist was somebody who like had echoes of like Led Zeppelin 20 years removed from that. Matt Cameron on the drums, like a criminally underrated drummer. Matt Cameron, like firstly, was Soundgarden's drummer throughout their most of their run. Chris Cornell started as their drummer. That was also when one of the inductees who accepted the award with them, Hiro Yamamoto, was in the group as the bassist before Ben Shepherd came in. Chris Cornell was the drummer and the singer at the time, and eventually just moved away from that. But Matt Cameron, like he went on to drum for Pearl Jam for 20 years after his run with Soundgarden, obviously going back and forth during the second run of Soundgarden. These guys, like they had this, like in the beginning, it was such a unique sort of like mystifying sound, and obviously as time went on they refined it. Eventually 95, when they put out Super Unknown, Black Hole Sun, like what was that was in the first Rock Band, wasn't it? You know what I mean? Like that's just one of those songs that people hear and they know, and it's a part of that like ethos of the 90s is Black Hole Sun. They put out an album after that, which is my favorite Soundgarden album. But after that, they broke up. He formed Audio Slave with the remaining members of Rage Against the Machine and did that for a while. The rest of them, went off, did their own thing, and they eventually came back together to put out, I think, one more album. There's talks of the last album still coming out, but I know that it's a legal thing. For me, it was great to see him get honored because, I mean, like, I don't know when we're going to put Chris Cornell in for his solo works and Audio Slave and whatever. So as somebody who like was deeply affected by his passing, like that's a day in my life that I'll never forget. From beginning to end, it was just a really horrible day. It was really nice to see him get honored. I thought the performances were great. Those guys can still play. Taylor Momsen, she's fine, I guess. She's no Chris Cornell. It was also really nice to see his daughter be able to perform one of their songs to close out their speeches. So I've kind of rambled on here for like 10 minutes, Kyle. Give me something on Soundgarden.
I mean, I don't have a ton to say about them. Like Black Hole Sun's a great song. They have a lot of good songs. They have that grunge sound pretty captured. They're one of the biggest grunge bands of all time. And Chris Cornell is a very prolific artist. By the way, Audio Slave would be first eligible in 2027.
How would they first?
25 years after.
Oh, 25 years after. Okay, fair enough.
2002 was their first album.
Yes, right. Well, I definitely know that I'm going to have to make you listen to some more Soundgarden because, like, I think you definitely gotta, or even Audio Slave. Like, we got to get you some more Chris Cornell in your life.
So here's something I want to talk about before we get out of here. I have a list here of future potential nominees for Rock and Roll Hall of Fames coming up.
Okay.
And I kind of want to see your feelings about the new one. Not like the people who are going to be inducted, who have been meant to get inducted for a while. The new people coming up. Who do you see making it in? And how is that going to shape this hall going forward? Okay. Because I think Soundgarden is a very fair inclusion. I think White Stripes, very fair inclusion. And those are both proper rock acts.
Right.
But the number of proper rock acts is
dwindling.
Yes. People who had proper albums that released and were really popular from this long ago. So let's look at 2026.
Okay.
The names that come up are Alicia Keys.
Okay. I could see her going in for sure.
I could see her going in too. I don't know if she'll get in right away. But I could
I
see her
think
getting him 100%.
I think with Alicia Keys, one of the legacies that she's going to leave is she kept R&B and soul music alive during the later half of the 90s, I think. Because I
Early
think there
2000s.
was well, was it not in their late 90s that she had
No,
her first album?
2001, her debut.
Okay, fair enough. So then 2000s. I'll never forget the first time I heard Fallen. Wow. Like just blown away. Sometimes there's a song can just like hit you in a way that like you're not expecting it to. And I'll never like I still to this day listen to that song.
So then you're talking about Jack Johnson.
Ooh, man. I feel like we can wait on a Jack Johnson just because like I feel like that guy hasn't stayed as relevant as you might want to be to get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Miranda Lambert. Nora Jones.
Nora Jones. Again, it's I think it's a lot of it. I think these acts, like, don't get me wrong, I think you can get away with like those two, maybe as like we need to like last minute somebody in. I don't know. Like again, for me, I think to get into a Hall of Fame like this, you got to really stay relevant. And like, how many big hits did Nora Jones have?
Not a ton. But the other big one is the Strokes.
This is the band that does Do I Want to Know, right?
Double check. God.
Oh, no, that's Arctic Monkeys. Sorry, that's Arctic Monkeys. The Strokes.
The Strokes is I'm trying to find popular Strokes songs. I don't know this band at all.
It's a British band. I'm sure of it. Maybe I'm wrong.
Last Night, Someday. I know Someday. Juicebox, Undercover of Darkness.
Yeah, I got nothing for these guys. I Undercover of Darkness sounds familiar, but I can't tell you I know much about them.
The Strokes are American.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
They're part of that like indie rock synth pop scene.
Ah, yes. There was very little I took out of that scene. I would argue I probably took more out of new metal.
So 26, I think, serves as an opportunity to clear up some of the backlog.
Yes, I do. I would agree.
But I think the Strokes and the Alicia Keys are probably the best bets of first people or first times. 27 is interesting.
Okay.
Let's go through 27. Beyonce, Avril Lavigne, Audio Slave, as I mentioned before, the Black Keys, Fall Out Boy, Justin Timberlake, Kanye West, Killer Mike, you mentioned before, LCD Sound System, My Chemical Romance. That's a pretty big collection of people and groups who could get in. Maroon 5 also.
Yeah. See that, like, you're right. Those are a lot of big artists and a lot of different genres too. So like I could see that group getting split up quite a bit and spreading that out amongst years to come after that. Like, I mean, you got to think like Ozzy Osbourne as a solo artist didn't get in until 2024, right? So like, that's a long fucking time after he started his solo career. So I could definitely see 27 getting because man, you're right. There's a lot in there to like. Beyonce, obviously, she could go just based on like hits. The Black Keys are interesting. Like that's my favorite band, but like knowing now that they don't have a top 40 hit, which I would have assumed that Lonely Boy or Gold on the Ceiling were at least closer than 64. However, I mean, I don't know how much the pop charts actually count towards whether they get inducted or not. Like,
and that's the big thing is they have a lot of popular records. Like they got a couple number one records. The question is, and that's sort of the big question why I wanted to ask, what is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame going forward? does pop relevancy matter? I don't know the answer to that because we've never really had to face that before.
I again, what I think, like whether or not we're talking about like, you know, chart numbers or whatever, I do think that there was a period of time where the Black Keys, that's one band that we'll talk about like for a second. Like, I do think there was a period of time where they were, while they weren't the number one song in the country, that there was a like a sort of a rise of like this garage rocky sound in bands. And I think it, I mean, I would say that that probably started with the White Stripes. And, you know, sooner or later we get bands like the Black Keys and Arctic Monkeys and what have you. Going into like My Chemical Romance, there's going to be an emo year. There's going to be, I don't think the emo and the metal scene that we got in the, you know, 2000s and into the 2010s, I don't think that scene's anywhere near finding a spot right away. Like you're going to hear bands like Disturbed and Avenged Seven. I guess Disturbed's already eligible, aren't they? I think their first album came out in 97. So
I'm just going to double check that. Oh God, yeah, Disturbed is for sure eligible. 2000, The Sickness came out.
Okay.
So their one would have been this year.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so do you have any more years besides 27?
Yes, I do.
Oh, by the way, Kanye. I think Kanye's got a lot of work to do on himself before we see him anywhere near an acceptance speech at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I don't know how you.
What do you think about Justin Timberlake? That's a fascinating one to me.
You know what? Here, I got a story about this actually. Do you remember when they did Live 8? It was kind of like the next Live Aid concert. It was mid 2000s. They did it in Canada, in England. It was all over the world. The Pink Floyd reunited for the first time in like since the late 70s to do a performance.
I don't remember this. No.
Okay. Well, hold on. So Justin Timberlake opened the Toronto portion of the concert. And he tells this story, I think it was on the Graham Norton show, of he got to the venue and him and his band are setting up or whatever, and he's looking at the lineup and he's like, oh, the fucking Rolling Stones are closing the Rolling Stones and Neil Young are closing this part of the concert. And he's starting to look at the rest of the lineup and he's like, oh, we are in trouble. And this is right after his first album had come out. Like he was full on Justified at this point. And he said that they're playing songs and he's like, I distinctly remember playing piano and having to dodge things being thrown at me. And in the minute, I didn't know what they were, but people were pissing into water bottles and throwing them at me and my band. And it's one of the more funny stories. For that story alone, I think Justin Timberlake has earned a spot in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Number one, because that's rock and roll is all hell. But he was one of the, I didn't know, I was not one of the only. He was the only guy who got out of the boy bands. Who else are we talking about? That came out of that era of music and survived it.
Can't say off the top of my head.
Because there is no one. All the other white boys, they went by the wayside. It was Justin. It's Justin. I also, his first album, honestly, like, I think it stands the test of time as one of the best pop records that's ever come out. People might argue that, but like, and don't get me wrong, Sexy Back was a great way for him to Summer Love. Like those, he has a lot of great tracks, but the first album I felt like was such a departure from what he was doing previous to that, that I think he found a way to, in a very rock and roll way, step outside of that and show people that he had a little bit more to offer than the boy band thing. So, and his success speaks for what I'm saying, I would say. I don't know if you would agree or disagree.
I think that's fair. I'm curious where the Rock Hall lands on somebody like JT, because I genuinely don't know. Maroon 5 is also an interesting one to me, because despite the pushback against Maroon 5, I would have said 5 years ago that they'd be a lock for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I have no idea now.
The pushback in the sense that like Adam Levine is a piece of shit, or
Yeah, but also
okay.
like people really don't like that band.
It's true. If we talk about rock and roll stories, one of my favorite Noel Gallagher stories is he's at a party and somebody comes up to him and is like, I just want, I don't want to bug you or whatever, but like, you really inspired me to like get into music, and I really love what you did. And he's like, oh, thanks. Like, he's like, my band, like I took so much of what you did and whatever. And he's like, well, what band do you play in? And he said Maroon 5. And Noel Gallagher was like, oh fuck, you guys are terrible. What did you get out of what I did and made what you did? Like, oh. And he's talking later in the evening. He's coming out of the washroom and he sees the guy standing in line, and he's like, oh, fuck, you're still here? And the response was, this is my house. And he looked around and was like, oh, it's a nice house. This is a nice house. This is a fun episode. I like this.
2028, Amy Winehouse, Arcade Fire, Kings of Leon, Pharrell Williams.
Okay. I would have thought Pharrell was earlier in that, but that's fair.
Well, Pharrell on his own.
Okay, fair enough.
Not as a producer, as an artist.
Okay. I don't know if Pharrell has had like, Mark Ronson. Yeah, that's great. I think he's a shoe-in, honestly. I think really? Mark Ronson. Yeah, I do, because he was all over Amy Winehouse too, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm. He was producer for that. Yeah.
So between Amy, what he did for Amy Winehouse and what he just done, he's worked with Bruno Mars, and everything he did with that album. Honest to God, I think that he's for sure a shoe-in. Those songs are timeless in a way that so many rock bands aren't. Like, I love Soundgarden with all my heart. I love the White Stripes with all my heart. But Soundgarden has Black Hole Sun as their timeless song. If you're a fan of the band, you would disagree and say there's others, and certainly I would be a part of that. But truth being truth, they have Black Hole Sun, and the White Stripes have a ton of great songs, but they have Seven Nation Army. That's those are songs that are timeless, and I would say that the same thing about them. So,
and then 29 is the last one I'll do. Danger Mouse, Grizzly Bear Band, who I love, but there's no chance. Gwen Stefani as a solo artist.
Okay.
The Killers.
Okay, yeah, I could see that too.
There's some interesting ones coming up. But what I think is interesting, like that 27 year in particular, where you're talking about guys like Kanye, we're talking about Justin Timberlake, you're talking about Beyonce, who are all eligible. If some of those names get in, if all of those names get in, this becomes an interesting discussion, because I think having Soundgarden and having the White Stripes protects you from the people. I don't know that there's a lot of people coming for Outkast, but from the past.
Oh, you would be surprised how many people really hate this whole hip hop in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame thing, which boggles my mind, because the true essence of rock and roll is everything hip hop was when Outkast was, a huge artist. So like it's the same thing with when the NWA went in. It's the same thing to a certain degree with when Jay-Z went in. Every time I see Jay-Z get an award for something, I'm like, listen, like, I'm happy for you, man, but like it just feels like masturbatory at this point. Like, Christ, like, I don't know, like those two, I can't do it. I can't do it with Beyonce. Well,
that'll be interesting, because I think if Beyonce gets in particular, we're talking about somebody who is predominantly a dance artist. That's not to disrespect the different genre hopping that she's done. She's an amazing artist. I'm not going to say anything bad about Beyonce. But, and I would say, especially with her early stuff, she is truly an R&B artist.
Mm-hmm.
As much as she has become a dance artist. JT is another one where there's a variety of musical style, including a lot of R&B. I think it's fair to say that Justin Timberlake is predominantly an R&B artist. Came out of Memphis too.
Yeah, he has that. Like I think that's where it comes from. Is like I don't think you can avoid R&B in a place like Memphis, right? So like,
but as we start to get into the great beyond, and we start running out of those classic rock bands, the debate then becomes: is Black Keys a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee? Or is Beyonce? Okay, or is it both?
I think it's both. I think you nailed it when you said that Soundgarden and the White Stripes get in a way to kind of like preserve the fact that there are still proper rock acts getting in. And I think that's what you were saying anyway.
Yeah.
I think there's enough of those.
No, that's not to say that they don't deserve to get in. They
absolutely. Like both 100%, I think, deserve to get in. The White Stripes made a song that, like, to this day, you put on in any sporting event, you hear in any arena, you're getting one of those long, like, UK wrestling fan chants going. Like, that's just the way it goes. And I know that by seeing them live and just hearing it, it's cool. But anyway, I think that we have enough rock bands to at least get us to 2040. And if the world's still ticking and we still have the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2040, dude, I think we're doing all right. I hope by that point we have another resurgence of rock and roll, because I do think that we are in definitely a disco era of music, and a disco. And for whatever reason, redneck country music is all over your charts.
But that's what's interesting about it, because I wanted to make this interesting comparison, because rock and roll is and has been a growing tapestry. What the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame represents is the fact that rock and roll started as a collaborative movement of a bunch of different genres, and we have now since retroactively included more genres into what rock music is. Mm-hmm. And as far as the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and inducting these more R&B acts, these hip hop acts, that type of stuff, which I think is a good thing. But what you potentially sacrifice in doing that is what country has so ardently protected itself from, which is a loss of identity. Country is still what it is a lot because of gatekeeping. I'm not a fan of that. I think the gatekeeping is kind of bullshit. But Nashville still runs country music. And even though your Morgan Wallens of the world are as vapidly bland to country music as Maroon 5 is to rock music.
That is such a great fucking comparison.
There's still enough, if not heart, then country instrumentation and, for lack of a better word, twang, for you to confidently say that Morgan Wallen is a country artist.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
Whereas what rock and roll is and what rock and roll is becoming in a world that seems to be moving further and further away from rock and roll, I think this is a fascinating situation where the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is going to go forward. I'm fascinated at the idea of whether they want to preserve the rock acts, the traditional rock acts that persevered and sold out arenas rather than stadiums, and but were continuing the tradition of a more classical rock, of a more blues rock, whatever it happens to be, but weren't the huge pop successes that some of these acts were in the past. Like
Fair.
Outkast won best artist or best record Grammy in 2000 or
Yeah.
2002. Like that's a huge deal. And when was the last like properly rock act that could say that?
It's fair. That's fair.
It's
They
been a
had
minute.
to put a new category in just so they got them in there. You
And so the
know?
question sort of becomes, do you want to preserve rock history even as rock and roll is fading from the popular zeitgeist? Or do you want to expand the tapestry of rock and roll and, you know, you might alienate some of the traditionalists, but are you going to look at me and say that Cyndi Lauper doesn't belong in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? That'd be ridiculous.
Yeah.
She absolutely does. Outkast absolutely does. And I get why people want to be protectionist, because there are people who probably look at something like country music, which is still as popular as it was, and say, man, I wish some of this rock stuff was still hitting with the younger generation. And I think there are people who are making moves to include more of it.
Yeah.
Olivia Rodrigo is very much including a lot more of that. And seeing people like Olivia Rodrigo and Chaperone at this event means that rock still means something to some of these people.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. And also, like, to a certain degree, Kyle, like, if you look at like the last year of music, like, there were a lot of really big events, tours, and what have you. Like, we talked about it in October. Oasis was a big deal this year. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like, they put themselves in the forefront of pop culture, I think, more so than I think anyone really anticipated they could by coming back and doing this world tour. It was all over mine. I can't speak for everyone's feed, sure, but like it was all over mine anyway. But I also like, damn, there was somebody else. Nope, no, it's gone. It's gone. I got on Oasis, and then there was somebody else that I think also did something this year that like put rock in more of a forefront. Certainly, it wasn't the Black Keys with their last album, so I will say that. I'm gonna forget about that one when the Rock Hall of Fame induction definitely comes.
It is interesting though, because I have personal feelings about these things, but I do sympathize with rock traditionalists, where you're seeing your genre of music kind of get pushed to the side a little bit. And then in your Hall of Fame, it's not being celebrated in the same way.
Right.
Part of that is because who are the bands that began in 2001, 2002, 2003 who are properly rock acts?
I think what I think eventually we're gonna see, Kyle, is a lot of these pop punk bands get in there. Like I know Blink 182 is already eligible. I'm sure we're gonna get a year of Blink 182. I'm sure we're gonna get a year of an emo year where we're gonna see bands like, because I mean, like you said, eventually we're gonna start to run out of what we have here. That being said, like bands like Iron Maiden, who still tour and do sell out arenas left, right, and center, and in metal that are considered gods, they're still not in. You know, there are tons of acts that are still not. There's tons from the 90s that still aren't in. You know, like you can go back to those wells enough times. And I do think like there's enough bands around too, like that are still going. Like Kyle, I will say, like you brought up earlier, like the jam bands of the late 90s or the mid to late 90s. We haven't really seen them get put into the Hall of Fame too much. You know,
No,
we could
Blues
I could see it.
Traveler's not there.
Yeah.
Like there are some bands who I would want to consider. Like, are you going to convince a traditionalist that a Hootie belongs into? I have no idea. But it's an interesting debate.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, with all that being said, Kyle, this was actually a lot of fun. I enjoyed sitting down to talk about this year's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We should definitely make this a habit because, again, I think there was a lot of interesting conversation to come out of this, regardless to what you did. Oh, here's I'll leave you with a fun fact about Soundgarden, actually. Okay. Do you remember the PC game from the mid 90s called Road Rage?
Vaguely,
It
yes.
was a motorcycle game, and you could like whip a
Yep.
chain or swing a bat. A Soundgarden song called "Rusty Cage" was the song that played as the game loaded up.
Cool.
And the last fun fact about that song is everyone knows Nine Inch Nails was covered by, or Nine Inch Nails Hurt was covered by Johnny Cash. Rusty Cage was also covered by Johnny Cash on that same album. And it is, I would recommend that as well. It is such a wild take on that song as well. So that being said, Kyle, why don't you send the people home happy?
Thank you so much for listening to this. We appreciate each and every single one of you, and you have been walloped.